Oh, what's this? New studio? Well, not really. I'm currently in Bali attending the Poco X8 series launch event. Yeah, this year I've traveled quite a lot, and I'm realizing that 2025 is quickly coming to an end. And next year is set to be one of, if not the biggest and most important years for the Mac. We've got a lot of new Macs on the horizon, so if you've been holding off upgrading your current MacBook, then I'm sure 2026 will be the year for you. So get that popcorn ready and let's talk about two very special MacBooks coming in 2026. And I know that this video is all about the MacBooks and not the iPads, but I just wanted to say that, number one, I've actually only taken my iPad here with me in Bali and not my MacBook, and I'm able to do everything that I need to do just on the iPad alone, and I've never been able to do this before. And number two, the first thing that I did was to install Paperlike. And if you're like me and you want to make your iPad's display feel like real paper in order to dramatically improve the Apple Pencil experience, all whilst also reducing reflections, then you should check out Paperlike as well, which you can do so by using the link below. Okay, so there are three super special MacBooks coming in 2026, not two actually that I mentioned at the start of the video. The first is the new OLED MacBook Pro redesign. The second is the new MacBook Air, and the third is a brand new budget MacBook that I think is going to dominate the laptop market. Now, since I've already talked about the OLED MacBook Pro in this video right here, in this video I wanted to talk about the other two. Starting with the budget MacBook, a successor to the 12-inch MacBook that Apple had from 2015 to 2017. And here, Apple is rumored to be aiming for a price of well under $1,000 according to Mark Gurman. And if they do manage to pull this off, then this will be by far the best value laptop in years. The M4 MacBook Air is already heavily discounted for Black Friday, as you can now pick one up for $750 on Amazon, brand new, link down below. However, this base MacBook is expected to be even cheaper. Many sources even state that a price of $599 to $649 would be possible, and that would be just crazy, because that means that when this base MacBook is eventually discounted as well, its price could drop to just $400 to $500. How can they achieve such a low price? Well, first of all, the new MacBook is said to be using an iPhone chip. Yeah, the Apple A18 Pro chip from the iPhone 16 Pro, according to Ming-Chi Kuo, or even perhaps the A19 Pro from the iPhone 17 Pro and the iPhone Air, according to some less reliable sources. But surely an iPhone chip should be fairly slow and sluggish powering a MacBook, right? Well, no. Actually, the A18 Pro chip scores higher than the M1 in Geekbench 6 single-core by about 40%, while also having a similar or even slightly higher multi-core. And you don't hear anyone complaining about the M1 being too slow. Also, keep in mind that the A18 Pro uses significantly less power than the M1, as it was designed to be an iPhone chip, so the battery life could be amazing in this new MacBook, but more on that later. And of course, the A19 Pro would be even more powerful than that, so what about the RAM? Well, the A18 Pro was only ever paired with 8GB of RAM on the iPhone 16 Pro, but then at the same time, Apple hasn't sold a new MacBook with 8GB of RAM in over 2 years now. So I'm hoping that a new MacBook ships with 16GB of RAM, as 8 in 2025 is quite low, even for a budget laptop. And especially since the new MacBook is going to be shipping with macOS Tahoe, which uses more RAM than the previous macOS versions, I do expect Apple to give it more than 8. Alternatively, if we do get the Apple A19 Pro chip inside, then we would automatically get 12 gigs of RAM. So performance will definitely be a strong point for this entry-level MacBook. And I think for its target audience, an audience that would likely only use it for lightweight tasks like writing emails, browsing the web, watching YouTube, I think that performance will be more than enough, even with the A18 Pro. Which I think will be especially noticeable if you're upgrading from an Intel MacBook, or possibly even from an M1. And I'm also fairly confident that it will easily outperform any Windows laptop in this price range. So what about its battery life? Well, given that the new MacBook is said to be using an iPhone chip, which are even more power efficient than the M series chips, you can just imagine what battery life we could be seeing out of it. For example, the M5 MacBook Pro already has a 24-hour battery life, which is just insane. And the M4 MacBook Air is rated at 18 hours. Therefore, this new budget MacBook could easily have the same battery life as the Air, or even better. Although, if I had to take a guess, I would expect either the same as the Air or slightly worse, in order for it not to cannibalize the sales of the Air series. So what about its display? Well, that would simply depend on which design approach Apple decides to take with its new entry-level MacBook. If they decide to design it like the M1 MacBook Air, in that case it won't have a notch. However, if they decide to design it like the M2 Air and newer, then of course we will have the notch present. Of course, this display would also be an LCD display with no mini LED or promotion technology. And according to a Digitimes report, this new MacBook could feature a 12.9-inch display, so smaller than the current 13.6-inch panel found on the MacBook Air. And if that's the case, Apple would almost certainly still market it as a 13-inch model, similar to how they brand the larger iPad Air. And while the MacBook and the 12.9-inch iPad Air may share the same diagonal size, I don't think they're likely to use the exact same panel. The reason being the aspect ratio. iPads use 4:3 as opposed to a 16:10 like on the MacBooks. And because of this difference, it's unlikely that Apple would simply reuse an iPad display here. As for the brightness, I do expect Apple to limit the brightness in software to 400 nits, just like they did with the M1 MacBook Air, just to make it look inferior to the current Air that goes up to 500. So now let's talk about the colors. Ming Chi Kuo reported on X that this new budget MacBook may come in 4 colors: silver, blue, pink, and yellow. And if these colors sound familiar to you, that's probably because they are the same colors that Apple already uses for their budget iPad lineup, the 10th and the 11th generation. You see, Apple tends to use vibrant colors for their entry-level devices to appeal to younger users and attract the broader audience. These would then perfectly match the current MacBook lineup, with the entry-level MacBooks and the iPads having bold and playful colors. Meanwhile, the mid-range Air lineup tends to stick to more premium colors, such as sky blue, starlight, silver, and black or midnight, or purple in the case of the iPad Air. And then for the Pro lineup, of course, we just have silver and black, which are more professional and safer colors. But what do you guys think? Would you actually buy one of these MacBooks if it comes in these vibrant colors? Let me know down below. Speaking of colors, if Apple does indeed release this MacBook in these stunning vibrant colors, then our wallpapers would be a perfect fit, especially a pack like Metal Mosaics by Michael. Link down below. Now let's talk about the storage. Apple has not shipped a MacBook with 128GB of storage since 2019, so I'm almost certain that it will have 256GB as the base storage. Although I've got a feeling that there will be a catch. Likely as a cost-saving measure for Apple, I think the base MacBook may have a single 256GB NAND module instead of two 128GB chips. These are, more expensive to produce, so one would be just cheaper, and as a result, we'll also get significantly slower speeds. Apple already did this with the M2 MacBook Air, where they just used one chip instead of two modules, and in that case we got about half the read and write speeds of the M1, M3, and M4 models. So I think we covered everything aside from the ports. We don't really have any concrete leaks here, but I can make some educated guesses. I think if Apple reuses the M1 Air chassis, then we'll likely see the exact same setup. So two USB-C 3.2 ports at 10 gigabit per second. And no Thunderbolt, by the way, since the A18 Pro chip does lack a Thunderbolt controller. However, if Apple uses the newer M2 Air design, then we could also see a MagSafe port here. Oh, and also, despite having dual USB-C ports, I don't expect it to be able to output to more than one external monitor. That's a limitation of the A18 Pro and the A19 Pro chip. Plus, by having this limitation, Apple kind of separates it a bit better from the MacBook Air, which now does actually support dual screens with the M4 model. So that's everything we know so far about a 2026 budget MacBook. All in all, I'm super excited for it, and I think it will just fly off the shelves. So now, what about that M5 MacBook Air? What do we know about it? Well, according to Mark Gurman, this is expected to come in spring of 2026. Possibly March, if Apple were to follow the last two MacBook Air releases. These would apparently have the identifiers J813 and J815 for the 13-inch and 15-inch models. As to what's actually new with these MacBook Airs, well, this will be a much shorter conversation than the budget MacBook, because really the only change would be the chip going from the M4 to the M5, with no other expected changes. Of course, the M5 was a huge upgrade compared to the M4 in both CPU performance, GPU performance, and especially AI, so this is still a really good upgrade for the Air. The display itself is only set to receive an upgrade in 2027, and that's most likely to be an Oxide TFT panel upgrade, with the OLED MacBook Airs only coming in 2029 apparently. Now, Apple may also upgrade the internal SSD with faster speeds, like with the M5 MacBook Pro. That'll be a very welcome upgrade. Other than that, we could see a new color, like last year's Sky Blue, or even some upgrades to Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 6, although I think that's extremely likely because the M5 MacBook Pro still uses Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.3, so it would be a bit odd for the Air to have better connectivity than the MacBook Pro. As for its pricing, I'm expecting this to stay the same at $999. And this would make a refurbished M4 MacBook Air a fantastic deal if you can grab one for around $700. And then, of course, this base MacBook for $600 or even less than refurbished would be one killer deal. So there you go, that's everything we know so far about these upcoming MacBooks. If you want to stay up to date with the latest rumors, then make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you're among the first to see the videos when they drop. Don't forget to check out our app wallpapers for some awesome designs, especially for the MacBooks. I'm Daniel in Bali, and I'll keep you posted with what I'm doing here and the Poco X8 Ultra event. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Zoneoftech signing out. Cheers.